climate change. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a climatologist. You know this clearly. I don't believe in a lot of this lab coat stuff, okay? Maybe you think that man-made climate change is real. Maybe you think that we put up all these factories, and the argument I hear all the time is, how could it not influence the climate of the planet? How could we not be influencing the weather? How can we not be influencing the climate of the earth when we're, setting up all these factories and CO2 emissions have gone up and all this? And there's some credible science that says that climate change is not real. If you look at the medieval warm period and, things like this. Look, I'm not going to pretend I know the full literature, but I understand there's arguments both ways. I'm really not interested in that. What I'm interested in is the political aspect. This is a political show. It's a current events show. And so I'm not here to talk to you about the science of climate change. I'm here to talk to you about the protests and why this is happening. What this means on like a metapolitical or even a linguistic level. To me, when I see these climate change protests, it has nothing to do with science. It doesn't even have anything to do with climate. To me, what this is really about is globalism. You have to think about climate change and this climate crisis. What is the real design of this manufactured climate crisis? Maybe mankind is causing climate change. Certainly it is not happening at the pace that people have been saying it is. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which is a subsidiary of the United Nations, they've been putting out models and studies on climate for like 30 years. The vast majority of their data is wrong. The vast majority of their predictions are wrong. I remember a study that said that out of 140 predictions the IPCC had made in a 25-year period from 1992 to 2007, like 134 of them were wrong. Okay, so you look at a lot of the data, and clearly there is a political agenda where they're creating a sense of urgency, which is not entirely accurate. They're saying things like, well, it's going to be record sea level rises in a matter of years, in a matter of 1 decade. Clearly this is alarmism. And so you have to ask yourself, why is there this global push by media, by governments, by international or transnational institutions to push an urgent climate crisis agenda? To me, primarily, this is about putting into the consciousness, or rather, this is about introducing to the American people, Western people, a global consciousness. This is what it is about. It is about imbuing the American people, and really imbuing all people in the world, with a global consciousness. When you think about climate change, this is an existential threat to humanity, as opposed to things like immigration, as opposed to things like sectarian or religious conflict or economic disaster. All these things are particular to a nation, to a people, to a community. All these problems might pit one nation against another, where you might have interests, collective, racial, tribal, religious groups rallying around a common cause. They're concrete in their particular, they are essential. Whereas the climate change is very general, global, and universal. They're rallying humanity. They're rallying humanity around this urgent crisis to, reverse the rising climate of planet Earth? And what does this call for? Of course, this calls for global action on the part of global governments, transnational institutions, regulation by the elites. These kinds of global catastrophes are meant to imbue in the minds of people a global consciousness that we're all in this together. There's no white race. There's no Christians. There's no Americans. There's only humanity. And all of our problems are global in scale, and it spans across all of humanity. We have no collective consciousness. And of course, who is going to solve the global problems? The global elite. This is who is empowered by this agenda. What are all these different people calling for when they talk about climate change? Are they calling for China to stop having so many kids? Are they calling for Africa to stop having so many kids? Are they calling for China to start using cleaner energy? The worst polluters in the world are in Asia. In terms of population, the most irresponsible countries in the world are in Africa and the Middle East. So why is it that all of this is taking place in the West? Why is it that all of this is taking place in Western Europe and the United States? Right? Why is it that the number one solution, if you wanted to wean the world off of fossil fuels and dirty energy, would be nuclear energy? It's the cleanest, it's the most sustainable, it's the longest term, it's cheap. This is the only viable, relatively renewable and safe energy source that exists. Sector officials are advocating for more and sweeping regulations. You can see what's happening in the American what is it, the Environmental Department, the EPA, you can see these sweeping regulations where under environmental protection guidelines, they see that private property very quickly comes under the control of public sector managers, where if you have a particular stream running through a plot of land, if you have some kind of protected habitat in your backyard, the government can come in and say that that land belongs to the government and must be managed by the government. What they say in these international plans, international plots, and even some of the national plans is they want to see people moved into the cities. They call for sustainability. They say that the answer to the global environmental catastrophe is for sustainable development, which means that China and all these countries can continue to have economic activity and continue to have profit, but it just has to be sustainable for the environment, for the world, for Africa to have, 10 billion people in the next 100 years. And so that means that people have to be driven off of large plots of land where maybe you get a lot of room to graze, you own property, you own land, you have a little bit of economic sovereignty and independence. And instead, you're pushed into the city. You're pushed into a high rise. That's more sustainable. You ride public transportation. It's more sustainable. Use public roads. Everything is shared. Everything, in a word, is under the control of managers. Nobody owns their own habitat. Nobody owns their own stuff. Everybody is incorporated into this sort of sharing space, this public domain, which is under the control of the managers. And the managers are managed by other managers, managed all the way to the top by, of course, transnational, supranational organizations. And so to me, when I see Greta Thunberg out there and I see all these children trotted out to say, save our planet, we're going to die, we have to rally around this climate crisis, I see it all very clearly. I see the agenda all laid out right before me. It has nothing to do with the environment. It has nothing to do with the climate. If you want to help the environment, stop littering. If you want to help the environment, tell people in West Africa to stop having 7 kids and stop burning dung. Go to India and tell people stop shitting in the river. Go to China and tell them to stop burning coal and start developing more responsible technologies. But instead, they're advocating that the government should simply control everything. And in particular, the global transnational elite should manage and control everything. And those are the people that are going to guide a global population to salvation. In order to do what? They say that we need to stop the rise of the temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. It's incredible to me. They've got it down to an exact number. They say that we can project with certainty that in so many years, the temperature of the planet, on average, is going to rise this many degrees. And if we change these emissions by this number, by this year, we can alter that change by this much. They've got it down to a science. Now understand, 75% of the world is ocean. We have not even explored 99% of the ocean, right? Relatively speaking, we know nothing about our planet. Relatively speaking, we know nothing about our solar system or the universe. But they're telling us that we can predict down to a degree Celsius how much the planet is going to warm based on emissions, based on human economic activity. They can't even predict if it's going to rain tomorrow. And they know down to a degree how much the temperature is going to increase based on how many factories are being built and cars are on the road and how many hamburgers we're eating a day. Give me a break. It's all a bunch of nonsense. It'll never happen. They're going to gradually take more private property. They're going to push you into the cities, push you onto public transportation, push you into high-rise condominiums where they can spy on you, where their police and security forces can control you, where it's under the control of unaccountable mayors, city councils, state legislatures, things like this, where everything is regulated, where they can abuse any environmental regulation as a pretext to arrest you, to seize your property, to manipulate how you behave and what your habits are. And we'll constantly be chasing a decrease in the temperature of the planet. Specialized climate science that nobody can comprehend, that in most cases is wrong and totally not transparent. They tell us 97% of scientists agree. Would you jump off a cliff if somebody told you 97% of scientists agree that you're going to make it to the bottom safely? That's essentially what they're saying. 97% of scientists agree that you need to stop eating meat and stop driving a car and not own a home and not have kids. And you have to watch television and eat bugs and not ask too many questions and not riot in the streets and not kill politicians, right? And not question the media because they're always telling the truth and the government's always telling the truth, right? That's essentially what they're saying. And we're supposed to believe them because we're wearing lab coats. You know? So it's not about science. It's not about climate. It's not about any of these things. As far as I'm concerned, all these huge demonstrations, they're utilizing children. They're trotting out this 16-year-old girl with Asperger's. Really? It's really incredible to me that people, I don't know, are people just that dumb that they see the global elite is pushing out literal crying children, screaming and yelling, children are going to die. Give us all your power. Give us your guns. Give us your property. How gullible people have to be to accept this at face value. That's number one. But beyond that, these people really want you to believe that they care about the future of the planet. Really? These are the nihilists that are telling us life has no intrinsic meaning or value. Just got to feel good, man. Just got to do what feels good while you're here. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time, man. These are people that are pro-choice. They believe in abortion. And they're telling us that we have to make all these crazy, incredible sacrifices for future generations. It's insane to me. The logic is not there. None of this makes sense if you're holding it all at face value, if you're taking it all at face value, if you assume they're telling the truth and you're trying to be logical. These people that are Satanists, these people that are abortionists, these people that believe that there's no intrinsic value or meaning to life, they're the ones that are embarking on this great crusade to save the blue marble, and these are their solutions. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in government contracts, thousands of pages of regulation, transnational, supranational oversight and regulation. To me, it couldn't be more transparent what's going on. And it's funny because people understand people understand this premise with literally everything else. When George W. Bush says we're going to embark on a war on terror, and in order to fight Al-Qaeda, we need to open up the Patriot Act, and we need to spy on everyone all the time and everything. People understand this premise then. They say, well, clearly the government is manufacturing a crisis in order to expand their power, in order to control the population. Liberals used to understand this, I think everybody understands it with their pet issue. Conservatives understand it with guns. People understand it all the time. Yeah, the government manufactures urgency, crisis, threat in order to cause panic. In a moment of panic, there are passions. People suspend logic, critical thinking, asking questions, And when passions are high, when there is public outrage, there is a pretext, there is a mandate to undertake sweeping reforms that would have otherwise not been possible. Reforms that benefit the people that are in charge or in bed with the media machine and the levers of power that are passing the regulations. It's so obvious. This is like politics 101. But for some reason, when it comes to the environment, nobody thinks like this. Everybody says, well, you really don't believe in climate change? 97% of scientists, man. But man, the weather's really crazy. The weather's crazy. There were more hurricanes this year. It was unseasonably warm this year. Climate change is real. We better give up all our stuff. Come on, really? I'll take my chances that the climate is probably more influenced by sun cycles, distance from the sun, geothermal factors than human economic activity. The world is a big place. I think it's a lot of hubris, number one, to think that we can dramatically change or destroy the planet, or number two, that if that was happening, that we could pack it all up in a bag and reverse it. I don't think either of those things are happening. And if they were, I still don't think it would be worth giving up our sovereignty, giving up our nations, giving up our peoples, and giving more power to a globalist, Satanist cabal that is clearly run by pedophiles. Who do you think are the scientists that are authorizing this stuff, right?